Hey friends, Mike here from the Retail Leadership Lab. Retail is hard. Retail can be harder than it needs to be, though. I have a story that I'll tell from way back in the 1900s when I was working for a specialty retail store in the footwear industry. It was my first leadership role. I had gotten the job because I guess I pushed a vacuum better and faster than anybody else, and I could straighten shoes better and faster than anybody else, mostly just because I was young and had a lot of energy, I guess. I had moved my way up from key holder to assistant manager to manager, and now I was leading a multi-million-dollar store just outside of Los Angeles. And on one Monday morning, following a really chaotic back to school weekend, I got an unannounced visit. And those that follow know that I'm not a big advocate of surprises. So I wasn't super stoked to have this senior VP in my location. He was incredibly gracious, even thankful and congratulatory on the sales volume that we put up over the weekend. I would say the visit was going extremely well, until which point that he spotted a piece of gum underneath the rack from distance. At this point, he became noticeably and visibly frustrated with something that I wasn't sure what it was just yet. And then as we dug in, he pointed at the piece of gum that was about 6 inches underneath the rack, about 5 feet down the aisle. And he was like, "What's going on here?" And so I told him, "Oh, there's some gum." And for my money, there was a lot bigger issues that were going on in the store at that point in time. But he pointed out that gum likely was not the result of a long, strong weekend in sales and heavy guest and customer traffic, but more likely an indication that standards were slipping, day in and day out standards, that we should be looking closer at that, because those end-to-end standards are there for the guest, for that most important customer who signs our check. And it was an incredible lesson to learn for somebody who was really young in their leadership career, really young in leadership in general, but certainly in retail leadership. And I would say this particular leader was incredibly tough, but also super fair. And details mattered to him, and details matter in retail. So he ended up becoming one of my biggest advocates. A little while down the road in my journey, I'd moved on from single store to multi-unit store leadership, but not officially. Those of you in retail, you know the drill. We got to do the job before we get the job, right? So I was leading multiple stores across a wide spectrum of geography in Central and Southern California. And he had this particular senior leader was on vacation, had popped into one of the locations. I happen to know that things may not have been awesome there. This was back in the days of we didn't have cell phones. We had pagers and pay phones. And so I got this 911 page from this same senior leader, and I called him back, only to find out that he was standing at a payphone. So good thing that I got back to him pretty quickly, right? So I called him back, and he said, "Hey, I'm out at this location." And I was like, "How are things?" And he said, "Owen, this is the type of stuff that gets you promoted, man. Being able to lead and influence from distance like that, that's amazing." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And he said, "Well, I was just at this location." He said, "Yeah, they're working through some stuff. A lot of men's shoes on the floor. Quarterly, they're redoing the rack plan. There's a parade in the city. Probably the perfect day to do this." And he said, "I expect that work happens." He said, "But I can tell that this store is all over the details, because even in the restroom, the toilet paper is all lined up by brand, and the paper towel, they're lined up by brand. And underneath the supply counter and the sink, they have all the soap lined up by brand." He said, "So anybody who has that level of detail on a day in and day out basis, and they're 300 miles away from their next level leader," he said, "kudos on them, kudos on you." And that was when he signed my ticket to what is known as Topeka Management Seminar, where I would officially become the multi-unit leader. So he was incredibly tough but fair. So guys, retail is hard. It is really hard on the employees that are trying to meet incredibly difficult standards on a day out and out basis. It is hard on guests and customers that work super hard for their money and then come in and have a disappointing experience. It is hard on leaders that are trying to lead from distance and maybe their influence isn't scaling. So that's why I wrote the book, The 7 Laws of Retail Leadership, to create a sustainable framework to make the hard a little less hard. So if you haven't grabbed a copy yet, I'd encourage you to go out and grab a copy. That's it for now. Let's go win.